All right, let's get right into it. Today we're unpacking a pretty significant shift in federal policy, Executive Order 1428. This is a big one, folks. It's a directive that could really change the whole game when it comes to the relationship between the federal government and local law enforcement. So let's break down exactly what it says.
Right off the bat, the official title. It tells you a lot about the intent here, doesn't it? It's not just about supporting law enforcement. The words are strengthening and unleashing. That language really frames the whole policy as a very decisive, very assertive move to empower the police.
And just for context, this isn't some old rule we're digging up. This is brand new. It was signed on April 28, 2025, which means its effects are really just starting to ripple out now.
Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty, let's quickly cover what an executive order even is. You can think of it like a direct command from the president to all the federal agencies. It's not a law that Congress passes, but for the entire executive branch, it absolutely carries the force of law.
So that brings us to the real heart of the matter, right? What does this order actually tell the government to go out and do? Let's get into the specific directives and the policy changes it's kicking off.
First up, let's look at how the order itself frames the situation. The document starts by defining a very specific problem that it says needs solving, and then it lays out its solution.
You really got to pay attention to the wording here. The order doesn't just talk about, policy disagreements. It uses powerful words like demonize and handcuffs. It's making a direct argument that certain local leaders are making it impossible for police to do their jobs, and that this is leading directly to a rise in crime.
Okay, so in response to that problem they've laid out, the order sets up 4 pretty clear goals. The first 3 are all about giving officers more power, more resources, and more protection. But that 4th goal, that's a huge policy statement all on its own. It's a direct order to end what it calls race and sex-based equity policies in policing.
So building on those goals, the next section gets really specific about how the order plans to directly support officers on the ground with a big focus on new legal and financial protections.
A really key word here is indemnification. It sounds like a complicated legal term, right? But the idea is actually pretty simple. It means protecting officers from being held personally responsible, financially, for their actions while on duty. So if there's a lawsuit or a settlement, the cost would be covered, not paid out of the officer's pocket. And that is exactly what Section 2 of this order commands. It tells the Attorney General to set up a whole system for providing legal help and this exact kind of financial protection, even suggesting they get pro bono, free, legal help from private law firms. And then Section 3 gets even more granular. It lays out this whole 7-point playbook to empower police. You can see how it creates a kind of cycle of support. It starts with new guidelines for aggressive policing and better training, which leads to better pay and stronger legal protections, and that is then used to justify tougher sentences and more money for prisons, with the whole thing being tracked by better data.
Okay, so beyond just direct support, the order also wants to change the actual tools and tactics that police have. And a big part of that is by changing how the federal government keeps an eye on local police departments.
Now this is a huge deal. Seriously. For years, the federal government has used what are called consent decrees. They're basically court-enforced reform plans for police departments with a history of problems. This new order completely flips the script. The new directive is to review every single one of them and potentially just get rid of any that are seen as getting in the way of police work. And they are not wasting any time. The order puts a real fire under these changes. The Attorney General gets just 60 days, 2 months, to review all those consent decrees. And within 90 days, the Department of Defense is ordered to speed up the transfer of surplus military equipment to local police and to figure out how military assets can be used to fight crime.
All right, the next major piece of this order shifts focus. It moves from supporting police to taking a much closer look at local officials. It lays out how the federal government could step in depending on what kind of local policies are in place.
And get this isn't just a recommendation or some friendly advice. Section 5 directly orders the Attorney General to make it a priority to federally prosecute state and local officials if they do certain things.
So what kind of actions could trigger this? Well, the order lays out 2 big ones. First, if an official is seen as willfully blocking the enforcement of criminal law. The second is if they use diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in a way that's considered to unlawfully limit what law enforcement can do. This takes direct aim at local policies the administration might not agree with. So when you step back and look at all these pieces together, one big picture starts to emerge.
This is a major expansion of the federal government's role in what has traditionally been local policing.
So how are they going to pull all this off? Are they creating some new giant federal agency? Nope. Instead, the order says to use the existing Homeland Security task forces. These are teams that already have federal, state, and local officers working together, and they're being tapped to be the engine for these new policies. So if there's one single thing you take away from all this, it should be this. Executive Order 14288 is a deliberate, massive push to increase the federal government's influence over the tactics, the resources, and the oversight of local police forces all across the country. And all of this leaves us with one final and pretty crucial question. This order creates a whole new dynamic between federal power and local control. The real question is, what happens when those two things intersect? What does this actually look like on the streets? And that's something we're all going to be watching unfold.